you have to develop trust. It takes time. I think that we understand that. I think we also have a proven track record, which helps, that our playbooks work. Again, no one size fits all, but I think that continuity and that legacy, we're very much focused on the same thing. We're less of a fix and flipper. I'd rather do fewer opportunities, own more of them, and be more focused on the long term, not 3 to 5 year holds, fix and flip.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Bryan Wethington, Managing Principal at River Capital. Bryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and about River Capital.
Yeah, so Bryan Wethington, I'm the managing principal of River Capital. River is what started as a lower middle market private equity fund, making control investments, meaning you buy the controlling shares of small, lower middle market businesses that are sub $30 million in revenue. So kind of from that $5 to $30 million range. In addition to that, I am the CEO of one of our portfolio companies, Blue Wave Products. Blue Wave is a consumer products business based here in Chicago, Illinois. We service Amazon, Wayfair, Walmart retailers with our different product lines, about 3,000 SKUs. We do things like above ground pools, game tables, saunas, consumer discretionary items. I'm also a very active board member of two bridge fabrication businesses, Bridge Brothers, based in South Carolina, does steel pedestrian bridges, and then Topper Industries that we bought in 21 that does aluminum gangways, docks, things focused on the marina markets across the coast of the United States. And then I also own a business called Tree Leads On Demand, which is a digital and print advertising business that does services the tree business. So kind of in summary, where River started as a private equity firm really has transitioned more towards what I'd consider a family office. So investing the family's money and continuing to utilize our limited partners that want to do deals with us. And when I say deals, it means doing acquisitions of living, breathing, operating companies. We don't always serve as management, but kind of that private equity family office is bringing a pretty straightforward checklist. Each business is different, but there's generally a pretty straightforward way to professionalize, to systemize, to create clean operating systems, clean financial data, so that you can make the right decisions.
They say that youth is wasted on the young. I don't know. It sounds like you've been a very busy man for quite some time now.
I have, yeah. So I grew up in Atlanta. Just a little bit of background. Grew up in Atlanta. Went to a great school called Lovett. Learned a lot of great things like how to study, and got a great network of people. Had a little bit of trouble when I was a junior, and I went to a different school, which was called Ben Franklin Academy, and it was the perfect transition. I mean, you couldn't draw it up any better. Ben Franklin is what's called an independent school. It's part of Emory here in Atlanta, which is a great school, and ultimately has a work-study program. And so I learned all these great things, had this great network, but I was kind of in a bubble. I feel like most people are, right? There's a disadvantage, I think, in the United States education system, whether it's public or private, that no one really teaches you about business, entrepreneurship, et cetera. And so at these very kind of formidable years, I transitioned and I worked for a senator that was running in Georgia for governor. I got my pilot's license. I started a business, and I was involved with this global text project, and it was transitioning different books to different languages to be shared around the world. And so I got to meet a lot of people, and I got a huge leg up. Most people kind of find that after college. And so I went off to college, where I went to the University of Mississippi down in Oxford, and it was a great fit for me. But I went off to college with this kind of one thing: I want to be successful. I didn't know what that meant, and I haven't had a lot of mentors over the years, but I had people I looked up to, and the one key thing is they were kind of in business. And so I went to college and I started a few different businesses, started a sizable tailgate business in Oxford that I sold after I graduated, had an apparel business, an entertainment business, a bunch of, I guess people will call them side hustles. They had a little more formality and they actually made money. And so that built a lot of confidence. And honestly, none of this I didn't learn it in the textbook. You just kind of pick it up as you go. Life happens when you're out there doing. And so I got all that stuff started and I ended up coming back to Atlanta to join up with River. My father had started it with a couple partners back in '83. I was very fortunate to work with him for 9 years until he passed in late 21, and I officially took over. But I've done a lot of things in my life, been involved in a lot of businesses. Not all of them have been successful, but I've definitely been busy and I've been kind of doing this since I was 16, 17 years old. And it's been a wonderful journey so far.
Yeah, nothing is more educational than failure, at least if you're paying attention, right? So they can't all be gems.
Exactly.
What is the origin story of River Capital? Your father launched it in the early 80s. What's the story there?
Yeah, so back in the 80s, River's one of the oldest of its type. Guys like Henry Kravis and Steve Schwarzman, big private equity guys. That's when the buyout boom, the leverage buyout boom started. KKR and Nabisco, Barbarians at the Gate, things like that. And so they started doing minority investments, in the Southeast, and ultimately graduated very quickly to kind of doing deal by deal. And then they graduated quickly to institutional funds where you raise a committed pool of capital, you go and you buy businesses. We bought in 40 something businesses throughout Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, different markets. But the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic have always kind of been our focus. Light manufacturing, value-added distribution, some select service, and generally kind of in those size parameters that I discussed earlier. You're usually looking to back good management. It's always kind of it's a tough balance, but ultimately you're dealing with a lot of founder-owned businesses. These guys and women that have run their businesses for 20, 30 years, whether it was family before and they took over or they're the first generation, and you're trying to handle that delicate transition of power and trying to focus on continuity and legacy, and ultimately taking a smaller business or a less sophisticated business and trying to apply some very straightforward concepts in the different marketplaces that they exist, and trying to ultimately, protect those jobs and enhance a company and help it grow. So that's Genesis.
There's, I would think in these days, a lot of people are looking over their shoulder because a lot of companies are growing through acquisition, and it's not always as friendly a scenario as you're painting in terms of putting positive energy and funds and structure into a company that's already doing well but could do better.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think in the world that I live in, I think you see more of that cutthroat back office consolidation, bottom line. As you get into the middle and the larger transactions, public entities, et cetera, there's definitely a lot of that goes on. I think down here in kind of Main Street where we play, there's not enough buyers. There's not enough capital. Small business in America makes up a huge portion, close to half of the GDP, and not far behind in terms of labor. And so I think there's a huge underserved need. The SBA, Small Business Administration, has a good program with the 7A loan and the 501 loan to do entrepreneurship through acquisition, and they're built for continuity. But outside of that, credit funds, equity funds, everyone's gone upstream. It's become a lot more of a fee business. And there's a lot of value you can create down here. And there's a lot of positive that you can create. And so I hope that over time, there'll be more capital that flows into this side of the market because there's a great need for it. They've been talking about the $10 trillion wealth cliff of baby boomers and other generations that have owned these assets. And a lot of their net worth and liquidity is tied up in these companies, and most of them won't transact. And so there needs to be a bigger focus. And so I feel good. I feel like I was put here to hopefully do something bigger than myself. I say that with not too much arrogance, trying to live a life of service to the best I can. You don't always get it right. But I do feel that you can have a positive change through business. It helps give people purpose, helps lifts them up. As we were discussing earlier, there's a lot of good that comes from just enjoying what you do. And if I can help facilitate that and bring people with me and do it together, I think that you can actually do a lot of good. in the country and in the world.
Hey, arrogance is merely a matter of perspective, right? You cannot do what you do without at least some sense of a healthy ego. Who would want to invest in a guy who doesn't really trust himself and his decisions, and right? So there's a fine line in terms of whose perception of your arrogance there is. I know that if I'm investing in somebody or in an entity, I want to know that they trust themselves and believe themselves even more than I do, right?
A great perspective, but it's very true and
Kind of
probably overlooked.
Yeah, a little slippery slope right there. Now, and who are your customers at this point? Who are your clients? Who's investing in River Capital?
Yeah, it's been a lot of, it was institutions and a lot of kind of higher net worth individuals, doctors, lawyers, business owners, things like that. Really, the next generation forward is probably a lot of the same. I think we're probably a little on the smaller side for the institutional money these days. On the debt side, on the equity side, it's just probably a lot of individuals. So I'd say those are my customers.
And what are the most common problems you're solving for them?
Yeah, I think you're trying to get, some allocation to the space, right? There's the stock market, there's real estate, there's a lot of different places to try to make money and create yield. I think that small business and private equity have always had outsized returns, alpha as they call it. And so I do think that although there is a good amount of risk in this asset class, there's a lot of opportunity to make good money. So I think, you're probably different strokes for different folks, but ultimately you're probably trying to drive investment returns for them.
Do I assume correctly that in COVID, you guys found some remarkable values in companies that were struggling a little bit to sustain themselves through the changes?
Yeah, honestly, COVID was tough. We were pretty busy with our own portfolio, so we weren't deploying money in that period, but there were certainly plenty of individuals that have taken advantage of the volatility, both good and bad, right? Many people had COVID booms, and the M&A market was at some of its peaks during the COVID years, and then into 2022. So there's trillions of dollars, what they call dry powder, right? Money that's on the sidelines that has to be deployed, right? These bigger funds, these bigger asset managers have to deploy that capital to get their management fees, their returns, and ultimately continue to raise more. And so you're always seeing kind of a flow of capital. And so I think there was a lot of people that had good fortune and a lot of people that had bad fortune. And I think there's probably a lot of fraud in between, right? With some of these PPP programs and the ERTC programs, good programs for businesses to help keep them alive. But there was a lot of money that was sloshed around. It's been interesting to see come from my perch, different businesses that have been unchanged, different businesses that have grown and decayed, different businesses that have kind of just, tanked, right? So I see a lot of different companies. I'm looking at a lot of different opportunities involved in a lot of different things. And so I think there's been good fortune and poor fortune for many different groups of people.
Gotcha. What differentiates River Capital in the market? What makes you stand out from your competition?
Yeah, I think staying power and legacy a little bit, having sat on the other side of the table for many business owners, right? There is some people, very few want just a check. Although the money is a driving factor when they exit because they're trying to responsibility take care of their family, these people want to see continuity of their business. And I think a lot of my competition, not all of them, because there's some much smarter people out there than me and my group, but it's a cost cutting, it's a bottom line number, and all those things are important. I think someone wants to have good continuity. They want to see the legacy continue and thrive without them. There's a lot of, you have to develop trust. It takes time. I think that we understand that. I think we also have a proven track record, which helps, that our playbooks work. Again, no one size fits all, but I think that continuity and that legacy, we're very much focused on the same thing. We're less of a fix and flipper. I'd rather do fewer opportunities, own more of them, and be more focused on the long term, not 3 to 5 year holds, fix and flip. That's the way I look at it. Perhaps I'm much more entrepreneurial. I also know how hard it is to do this, to create value, to try to take an unsophisticated business and try to add some sophistication to it. It's manual. very intensive. And so I think that we understand that. I think we can have those conversations. And I personally feel like we're focused on the same end goal, which is legacy and continuity.
Hey, you say legacy comes down to, a brain trust, an idea, some human beings. I always say that when businesses decisions are made only based on ones and zeros and spreadsheets, and you forget about that there's a human being at every single node of that equation, things tend to get a little murky. But when you nurture human relationships and you put the brain power and money where it belongs, the sky's the limit. And it sounds like you're committed to nurturing people's ideas, and legacy is an important word.
Yeah. You never get it perfect, but people are your business. How you treat them, how you interact with them. I think a lot of times the capital allocator leaves it to management. I think there's a fine balance where you don't want to overstep on your teams that you pay to run your businesses and try to take your ideas. But I do think that you got to be on the ground. You got to see these people frequently. You got to build relationships. What's important to them? It's little things too, right? It's not grand gestures all the time. Sometimes it's a pat on the back, an acknowledgement. Sometimes it's going to their kids' football games. Sometimes it's the little things. And it's easy to overlook in this busy life and the 5 to 10 second sound bites. But at the end of the day, people want to feel cared for, nurtured, like they're developing. And I think if you generally approach business with a service mentality, it'll take you pretty far, I think.
Hear, hear. All right, switch gears a little bit. What role has content played in the growth of River Capital? How are you telling your story these days?
Yeah, I don't think we've done a good job telling our story, candidly. So I think that it perhaps creates an opportunity for us. Being in that business with Brand Logic and Tree Leads on Demand, I certainly understand that, guys like Donald Miller, Story Brand, and different. It's all about how you tell your story. That's what resonates to people. And I'm looking forward to trying to, it's an interesting story. It's relatable. It's family, it's legacy, it's powerful subjects that I don't think enough people talk about. And so I'm looking forward to trying to put some real focus on it, because I think that's what ultimately tries to help you stand out in a busy world.
Well, as they say, I know a guy.
Yep.
All right. What's your URL? Where can people find River Capital, and what social media outlets are you using these days as well?
Yeah, so the website's www.river-capital.com, CAPITAL, like money. And so, we just refreshed the site. They can catch us on there. We have a LinkedIn, not very involved on the rest of the socials. Definitely a place we're going to put some focus, potentially look at a podcast and trying to build out some of the social side as we go into 23 and 24. But, you can reach me personally on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I think there's a great community of people, I guess, X in the small business side, in real estate side. There's some really creative people on X. And so that's a good place to interact. So, you can get in touch with me through my email, through my office, through my different companies' socials, but or just directly through the website.
Bryan Wethington of River Capital, I wish you and yours and all of your endeavors all the best in the future. Appreciate you spending some time with us today on Business Ninjas.
It's a pleasure.
Be well.